Spider pig, does whatever a spider pig does. Can he swing from a web? No, he can't. He's a pig. Look out, it's a spider pig. You're not a pig. Hi, it's John Keaton 96600, and I just got back from seeing, well, not just got back, it was a couple hours ago, but I just saw Spider-Man Homecoming. So, I know this review is a few days late. Spider-Man Homecoming came out last weekend, and it's, by the time you see this, it'll be Wednesday, so that's almost a week later. So, I do usually like to do reviews the week that they come out, but I feel like there's still a lot of people who haven't seen this movie, because not everybody goes to the movies right away when a movie comes out, so I thought I'd go ahead and do this review. And let me tell you, when they announced that Spider-Man was going to be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I wasn't really surprised, because this is something that a lot of people have wanted for a long time. We want Spider-Man to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We, want to see him hanging out with the Avengers, and that was kind of a thing on, the Spider-Man show on Disney XD. I haven't seen a whole lot of it. I can't even tell you the exact title, but I do know, the Avengers were a thing and that, and, Spider-Man hangs out with, the huge rogues gallery, and, it's not the same universe, but it's very much, espousing the same idea that Spider-Man exists in the world of the Marvel superheroes. So I knew that a Marvel film studio cinematic universe Spider-Man was coming, but I just, at the same time, I wasn't super excited to see it. And I assume that most people would be sick of Spider-Man by this point. Here you go, Spider-Pig. Because, we've had the movies rebooted twice in the past, 20 years. That's insane. People were saying, when the Andrew Garfield movies were first announced, we just got done with, the Tobey Maguire movies, and they're already rebooting it. It seems too soon, and then they're rebooting it again. It's what? So I kind of assumed people were sick of Spider-Man and didn't want to watch it anymore, and I was kind of wondering, I wasn't super excited to see this movie itself. Turns out I was way off. People were really psyched for this movie. Hold on. The pig is making noise. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. Okay, so a lot of people were really excited for this movie. All my coworkers were yes, I'm so psyched to see Spider-Man. We had, the merchandise set out, the square popcorn tub and, the hollow Spider-Man plastic head that you could put popcorn in. That's weird. But those things sold, and kids were, pointing at them Daddy, can you get me the Spider-Man head? And they're no, it's $10. Are you crazy? It's there was a lot of hype around this movie. And after the movie came out, before I saw it, I kept hearing people say, this movie is awesome, it's great, this is the Spider-Man movie we've always wanted, all this stuff. So I'm okay. So I watched it, and I gotta say, I wasn't blown away. Don't get me wrong, I like the movie. I think it's a good movie, but it's kind of a decent superhero flick. And I feel we've seen a lot of this kind of movie, especially lately. Wonder Woman blew me away. That movie was so good, it kept me guessing. I was engaged in the action. I really loved the characters. Everything about it was great. This movie was decent. And this is really the most that I personally can say about it. But, I think I'm in a minority because most people fucking love this movie. And I think it's kind of interesting to look at why that is. Why people aren't sick of Spider-Man yet. Why this movie has appealed to so many people. And just what is it about Spider-Man's inclusion in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that people like so much. And I will be talking about my own opinions on this movie, as well as how I think it stands up as a movie on its own in general. But I am also going to be talking about these other things because I feel I just find it really fascinating. So let me go into a very brief plot summary, and giving a brief plot summary is something that we haven't been able to do in a Spider-Man movie for a while, because Spider-Man movies have been loaded with stuff. But this movie has a very simple story. Basically, Peter Parker, fresh off Captain America Civil War, has been waiting around New York for Tony to call him again, because what Peter really wants is to be an Avenger. He's already stolen Captain America's shield and participated in the Civil War thing, so he thinks he's ready. Tony doesn't, because Peter is 15, and he says, like, no, just, like, they haven't really been contacting Peter at all, and they've just been leaving him to solve crime in New York. And Peter wants to do more, and he's tired of everyone treating him like a kid. And he might get his chance to do more when a criminal organization headed by the Vulture pops up, played by Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton is in this movie. And it turns out that they are a salvaging team, a former salvaging team, who they used to salvage, like, alien parts left over from, like, basically previous Marvel movies. Like, we see them beginning, like, taking apart a spaceship. I haven't really been following the Marvel universe that closely, so I don't know exactly what battle this is the aftermath of. Presumably it's the first Avengers movie, but I don't know that for sure. Because I haven't seen all of the Marvel movies, there might be some things that I miss or references that I don't get, so you're going to have to be patient with me on that. But, basically, in a kind of interesting origin story, it turns out that the salvaging team lost their jobs when Tony Stark Stark Industries basically got the authority to do all the salvaging themselves, so leaving out the worker class salvagers. So, as Michael Keaton himself puts in the movie, the superheroes make the mess and then get paid to clean it up. Like, dick move, Tony, which is, I think, what it's going to say on Tony Stark's tombstone when he dies. Dick move, Tony. Because that's basically the story of his entire life. So basically, Michael Keaton becomes the Vulture and continues to, basically steal the super advanced technology that his team was previously salvaging and sell it as weaponry, because he's actually a dad with a family, and he keeps saying, like, even when the Stark Industries people show up at the beginning of the film, he's like, I got a family, I got to keep doing this, I got to support them. And they're like, not my problem, get out of here. So he keeps saying, to help his family, he's got to keep up with the crime thing. So Spider-Man catches wind of what he's doing, trying to move the weapons, and believes this is his chance, that if he stops them, it can prove that he's good enough to be in the Avengers. And it goes from there. So what you might have noticed about this story, and what I've already pointed out, is that compared to, like, especially the Amazing Spider-Man movies, the story is really simple. Like, the third... Okay, like... First of all, I'm going to get some terminology out here. For those of you who don't know, the original 3 Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, I'm going to call those the Sam Raimi movies, because Sam Raimi was the director. And then for the Amazing Spider-Man movies, I'm going to call those the Andrew Garfield movies, because Andrew Garfield was the star in those, and I don't know who directed them. So, in the second Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield and the third Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, those movies had too many villains and there were too many things going on. And, like, they kind of made the same mistake as Batman and Superman, but on a smaller scale. They didn't try to cram in as much stuff as Batman vs. Superman did, but basically, like, in the second Amazing Spider-Man movie, you had Electro, and you had the Green Goblin, and you had the Rhino, and you had the death of Gwen Stacy, and you had, like... all this stuff, and it was too much for one movie. This movie is much more streamlined. This was something that Wonder Woman did right as well. There was one specific arc about basically Peter Parker trying to ape the older, like, adult superheroes that are in the Avengers, and trying to stop crime at home, but, like, in a way that shows that he's still young and inexperienced, and, I think youth is basically the main theme of this movie. And this movie does have, like, this kind of adults versus kids kind of narrative, which it kind of has in common with another super movie that came out this summer, Captain Underpants. But where Spider-Man differs from Captain Underpants is that, like, Captain Underpants was a very basic, like, kids are always right and are the source of goodness, and adults are, like, unhappy, miserable people who, like, enforce their will on children. Like, it was a very, like, black and white kind of scenario. Spider-Man Homecoming is a little bit more subtle with that. Most of the adults trying to control Peter's life aren't doing so maliciously, like the Vulture is. The Vulture, after the first time Spider-Man stops him, vows to kill him. But like everybody else, they're worried about him. Like they don't want him to get hurt, and they want him to like stay home and do the things that they know they're capable of doing, and they don't want him to go further than they think that he can, because he might end up seriously hurt. And he like has to dodge around his responsibilities, and he like he's keeping his super. He's like the only person in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, now that I think about it, who actually has a secret identity. Like, everybody knows who Iron Man is. He announced it himself at a press conference with like dozens of reporters in front of him. Everybody knows who Steve Rogers is. He was like a propaganda figure. Like, secret identities aren't really a thing in the Marvel Universe so much. But Peter is the only one who has one, and he's got to keep it a secret from Aunt May because he doesn't want her to, have to deal with more things after losing Uncle Ben, and he keeps a secret from all his teachers. And as a result, he like gets pushed around at school and constantly ordered around, and he doesn't live the glamorous lifestyle certainly not that Tony Stark lives, and he doesn't like hang out in the Avengers Tower with like their spaceships that they have. Like, he's just like very basic, down to earth. And it kind of comes to this narrative. He's having like to dodge the rigid social structures in place that are surrounding a kid, not just from Tony Stark, who's monitoring everything he does, but and like won't invite him to go on another mission with the Avengers, no matter how many times a day Peter calls them. And he does call and text both Tony Stark and Happy, his assistant, many times a day. It's like, Peter, like, I think they want you to just like play basketball or something. Like, just go away and be a kid. Like, stop trying to save the world. But he doesn't want to stop, because with great power comes whatever. But so yeah, it is kind of this like, Peter is very obviously navigating a kid's world. Like, and this is something that actually didn't interest me that much about the movie, because on the one hand, I feel like a lot of TV shows, especially when I was a kid, and probably still nowadays, focus on school too much. And like, school is something that every kid sees every day, and I don't really want to see it on the big screen anymore. So like, having to like, I have to save the world, but I'm late for gym class, that kind of thing. I'm kind of sick of that kind of story. But at the same time, Peter actually being in a school with kids is kind of a nice change, because before, like, all the previous Spider-Man movies, Peter Parker was technically, like, in high school. Like, I think at the beginning of the second Amazing Spider-Man, he graduates from high school. And, like, in the first Sam Raimi movie, he was also in high school. But, like, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield don't look like kids. And none of the people in that high school look like kids. Tom Holland, who plays Spider-Man this time around, does look like a kid. To the point I actually thought he was one, but I looked up his age. Apparently he's 21. So there's that. But he looks like a kid, and he sounds like a kid, and he does a good job playing a kid. And like, all the other people at the high school look like kids. So there is kind of some humor behind it. Like, they do like typical school cliches, like Spider-Man has to choose between his responsibilities as a crime fighter and studying for academic decathlon. Like, that kind of thing. But I feel like there's also, like, it's also kind of funny. Like, they don't straight up satirize the school system, but they do kind of portray the school as, like, full of, like, impressionable, like, personable people. It's not just, like, a sea of cliches. This is actually one of the things that they've changed, I think, from the Spider-Man lore. Because, like, when the first Spider-Man comic came out in the 60s, it was awash in, like, the typical, like, high school cliches, which weren't cliches at the time. They were probably new, but now they've become cliches. Like, he had Flash, who was the bully who always picked on him, and Spider-Man was the nerd who always kept to himself and didn't really have any friends, and he loved a girl from afar who was way cooler than him, and, like, all this stuff. None of that is in this movie. They actually update the high school that he's in, so it's, like, more realistic high school. Probably every review will mention this, so I'll mention it too. The high school is really diverse. Like, there are, like, tons of black kids and Asian kids and Indian kids, and, like, it's just like a huge motley. And it's kind of rare to see that in movies, because, like, usually, someone pointed out, a lot of the background cast of a movie will be mostly white, and if they do have representation, it will be, like, one character. No, like, this is a very ethnic school, which makes sense because it's in New York City. There's a lot of different ethnic groups living in New York City. The second thing is that, like, the kids do have cliques, but it's not the same as, like, fitting into, like, the cliched, like, herds that schools travel in. And they do actually, like a lot of the kids have funny scenes and funny lines. I remember there's one scene where basically, this is jumping ahead in the plot a little bit, but basically the kids go on the academic decathlon trip, and they stay in D.C., and while they're there, there's a crisis, and Spider-Man saves them. And so, like, on the school news channel, which is hilariously awkward. It seems like a real school news channel because, like, they have the really bad green screen behind them, and, like, the two kids who are doing the reporting, one of them is actually Betty Brant. Like, that's interesting, seeing Betty Brant as a high school student. The timing is off, and they're not delivering their lines quite right, and they don't really know where to look. Like, it seems like a real high school channel. It's funny. And so anyway, they're, like, interviewing all the kids. They're like, yeah, Spider-Man saved us. It was really cool. And then they interview the teachers, like, I'm just glad all of the kids are safe. It would be a shame to lose a kid on a field trip. Not again. It just, like, zooms in on his face awkwardly. It was black comedy, but it was funny. One of the most interesting changes they made was with Flash. Now, I don't know if you even remember Flash that well. He wasn't used in the previous movies that much. He kind of mostly showed up in the cartoons. But anyway, Flash, like I said, was a school bully, and he was like a jock and like a football star, track star, baseball star, and he beat up Peter Parker a lot. Flash has been changed radically so that now Flash is actually a nerd like Peter, and he's actually not as, like, he's like a lower class nerd than Peter. Like, Peter's still the smartest kid in school. He's brilliant. He always answers questions first. He designed his own web fluid. I mean, they don't say that, but it's easy to imply that. And Flash is, like, constantly struggling to keep up. He's like the second pick to actually participate in the ACDEC team, and he actually got his nickname Flash. It's implied because he always answers first, even if he doesn't actually know the answer. It's more important to him to be first. And it's really interesting just to see how, like, the media portrayals of high schools go throughout the years. That Flash has gone from the jock to the friend nobody likes. Because one thing I do remember about the Andrew Garfield movies was that they didn't portray Spider-Man as, like, the comic book loving nerd that he is in the comics, because they said that nerds nowadays aren't ostracized the way nerds in the 60s were. Like, if you were a nerd in the 60s, you got beat bloody every day. But if you're a nerd nowadays, you have a lot of friends who share your interests. You can go online, and, like, there's huge communities of people dedicated to the thing you love. And, like, I saw a stat recently, like, not that recently, a couple years ago on the news, that said that kids that do well in school are actually more likely to have more friends than kids who don't do well in school. So, like, being a nerd won't make you an outcast anymore. And so, like, in The Amazing Spider-Man, what they decided to not make Andrew Garfield a nerd, but instead of made him kind of a weirdo who hangs around in the halls with his hoodie over his face so that he would still be ostracized. And people didn't like that, because one of the reasons people like Spider-Man is because he's a nerd. They like the idea of having a nerdy superhero, because basically it means that he's like the people reading the comic. Like, he's basically them. Spider-Man is one of us, and they wanted that. So, like, in this movie, I think they decided, okay, well, let's make him a nerd, but let's, like, actually give him a social circle of, like, friends who are also nerds. And let's just have it that he's pushing them away because of his responsibilities. Okay, we can do that. And I think that is a little more interesting. The main girl that he has a crush on in this film is a girl named Liz, who I guess is supposed to be like Liz Allen from the comics. And, you know, she's basically, she's like hits all the notes for like the basic, what's the word, love interest in a film. That makes you think he's probably not going to end up with her, because first of all, his name is Liz. Her name is Liz. His name is not Liz. And that's not really who Spider-Man is well known for ending up with. Second of all, there's not a whole lot to her. She's, you know, she's smart, and she's pretty, and she's nice, and she doesn't have any flaws that I can see. And she does have a slightly interesting arc, as even though she likes Peter, she gets more and more fed up with him throughout the film as he bails on her again and again to go save the day, the selfish bastard, but can't tell her where he's going. Like, he bails on her at the party that she invited him to. He bails on her in academic decathlon. He even bails at her at the titular homecoming dance. Like, yeah, there is actually a homecoming dance in Spider-Man Homecoming. It's like, it's weird that this dance is significant enough to name the movie after, but okay. But, yeah, so like she eventually decides that she and Peter aren't going to work at the end of this film. And I don't know if that's a spoiler, but it doesn't really, because did you really think that Peter was going to end up with Liz? You didn't, because you know Spider-Man, and you know that's not going to happen. So the other kid I do want to talk about in the group is Ned, and I feel like Ned is a new character. I don't remember him in any of the movies or in any comic book lore that I'm familiar with, but basically being a nerd in 2017 is such a good deal that Peter now has a best friend who knows his secret identity. How about that? So you've probably noticed like the chubby Asian kid in the commercials who's like asking Peter all those stupid fanboy questions like, can you summon a legion of spiders? Can you shoot venom? Can you do all this? Like, that's Ned. I guess Peter decided to stop hanging out with Harry and hang out with Ned instead, which is a good choice because Harry is kind of, he doesn't need that kind of baggage in his life. So Ned's a good character. He's funny. He's helpful in the field. He doesn't have any powers, and this is like the main tie that Peter has between his superhero life and his Peter Parker high school student life. And he's like, feel like Ned kind of keeps him grounded in a way. Even though he found out about his secret identity totally by accident. It's pretty funny the way he finds out. Like, Peter swings into his room in the middle of the night. He's very careful to like shut the door so that his Aunt May doesn't see him. And then he turns around and Ned is sitting in his bed with his mouth wide open like, "You're Spider-Man. You crawled on the ceiling." Like, no, shh. So, yeah. One thing that's great about Ned is like he keeps asking like, all these questions. He's just like, "Can I be the guy in the chair?" And Peter's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "The guy at the chair, the one who's like, does like the mission control and like calls him up and has all the screens. Can I be that guy?" It's like, you want to be Otacon? Like, he wants to be Spider-Man's mission control. I've never seen a character in a film whose dream is to be Wade from Kim Possible, but okay. Ned kind of looks like Wade, now that I think about it. They even have blue shirts. Whatever. So that's that. That's Peter's high school life. The villain in this movie is played by Michael Keaton, and he does a pretty good job at the Vulture. Like, they try to give him, like, this sympathetic hero or villain origin, like, I'm just doing this to support my family, and I've been trampled on by the very heroes who are trying to protect us, but they're not actually trying to protect us. They're just trying to protect big buildings and stuff. Like, all those, you see the superheroes, like, flying through and trying to save the cities, but they don't actually care about people on the ground. And it's really fitting that he chooses Tony Stark to direct this IRAT, because Tony Stark is the most narcissistic of the Avengers. It's not even a contest. It's clearly him. So, like, the fact that Tony is the face of, like, the, like men sitting in their ivory tower is pretty fitting. It's like working-class villain who's trying to get revenge on, the big guys who trample the little guys. And I haven't actually read many comics or I'm all that familiar with the Vulture as a character, but I do own this. This is the Spider-Man Ultimate Guide. I bought this in elementary school, so it's way out of date, but basically this is kind of an encyclopedia of Spider-Man lore with a list of like his rogues gallery and basic, really big arcs, comic books, like the Master Planner thing and the Clone Saga that everybody hated. This came out right after the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. So, yeah, it's pretty old, but it's still useful. So anyway, Vulture's name, according to this book, is Adrian Toomes. And let me see. Page right here. Should be early on. Basically, they took his origin story and they retooled it so that it fit more into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It says here he was originally in the comics where the character originated. He was an inventor who started an electronics firm, and his best friend took control of the company and fired him. So he swore revenge on the rich guys. Here embodied in his best friend who betrayed him. They sort of keep that. He was a guy who had a basic job where he knew his way around alien tech, advising other guys on how to break apart alien machinery. That's really hard to break apart because it's alien machinery and it's better than ours. And who got trampled by somebody who cared more about the money than he did about his livelihood and his family. But they kind of fit it more into this universe. So that the stuff he's salvaging is stuff from other Avengers movies, and the people who drive him out are actually the heroes of those Avengers movies. And in addition to the young versus old thing, there is a narrative of like, not the poor versus the rich, but the humble versus the rich. And I have heard criticisms that the first Iron Man movie basically functions as kind of a conservative fantasy. Tony Stark, rich white guy, is kidnapped by a bunch of Middle Eastern terrorists, use weaponry that he designed, that he alone has control of, to beat them and save the day and retain his riches and power. And this movie doesn't completely deconstruct that, but it does show a tendency to kind of push against it a little bit. And it is true that the villain standing against that is the villain, and it is kind of annoying that villains who are given humbler origins usually attempt to give them pathos and ends up like vilifying the working class, which wasn't the intention, but is what ends up happening a lot. Like how Batman is the rich billionaire, and a lot of the villains who oppose him are people with tragic backstories who came from poor households and deal with abuse every day, and who really, in a better world, wouldn't be turned into mass criminals trying to take down the guy with the silver spoon in his mouth. Though it's true that Batman has his own issues to deal with, or something, I think. Whatever. But, yeah, and there is kind of an irony in Michael Keaton's character, Adrian Toomes, because he's, like I said, doing this for his family. Like, I gotta protect my family. I'm doing this for my wife and my kid. You know, I can't walk out on them. I can't quit this business. And while he's saying that, he's trying to kill Spider-Man, who is a 15-year-old boy. Like, it's an irony that, like, that's present in the first half of the movie that doesn't really get pointed out, but it's like, you know, Spider-Man might be the same age as his kid. It's like, it's only his own kid that matters. Other people's kids can go hang. And it's true that at this point nobody knows Spider-Man's secret identity, but it's still a nice bit of irony. Michael Keaton himself is pretty good at giving that kind of smile, like, where it's basically friendly, but it also looks like you're gonna murder someone. Like Dr. Grant in Jurassic Park made that face a lot too. It's like this, hey kids, want some candy? We're gonna have fun tonight, boys. Like it's almost friendly, but it also looks like you're about to stab someone. And he's good at making that face. The Vulture design looks really cool. Like, I don't know if I showed you the picture of this book of the design of the Vulture from the original. But one of the hardest things about adapting a comic book to live action is a lot of the designs in the comics don't look good in live action, which is why, like, so many films, like the first X-Men film, took the lazy route and just had the Supermans all wear black because their original costumes weren't going to work. It's like, oh, black something, let's throw them on black. So this is what the Vulture looks like in the comic. Yeah, that's not going to work. So you've probably seen the design in the commercials, but basically he has like this metal harness with the huge metal wings with turbines on them, and there's like this glowing mask, and he wears a jacket with like a fur-lined hood, so that looks like the ruffles around a vulture's neck, and it looks pretty neat. Especially like there are no as many action scenes with the vulture as I would like, but maybe that's one of the things that people might find more refreshing about this movie is that there isn't a whole lot of action. But there isn't as much as I would have preferred. But anyway, when the vulture lands and like his wings like come out of the ground, they like come out of his back and they like latch himself to the ground. He like hulks over and looks like a metal bird of prey. Like, it looks cool. There's one particular scene I remember where Spider-Man like shoots a bit of web at him and it sticks, and like one of the wings reaches over and the feathered design at the end like snips the web off. It sounds silly when I'm describing it, but it looked cool actually in the film. It's like, oh shit. Yeah. It's hard. This Spider-Man Homecoming is actually one of those films that it's hard to talk about without getting into spoilery stuff. So it seems weird because it's not like there is kind of a twist in this movie, but it's like kind of difficult to talk about. It's not like a huge groundbreaking twist or anything. You know, it's not like something like The Sixth Sense where one scene happens, like, oh my god, everything is different now. Like, it's not that kind of twist, but it is a movie that it's hard to talk about the whole thing, what it's about, without mentioning the end. So, what I am going to say about that is, basically, this movie is funny, and it's colorful. It's not as action-filled as I would like, and it does bother me that it gets bogged down with school stuff, but the school stuff, for what it is more interesting than in previous Spider-Man films. And it does feel like an authentic high school. Like, there's a difference between high school that you go to and high school as presented on TV. And this very much feels like the high school you go to. Though the fact that I'm talking about the high school so much is probably an indication that this is a little school-oriented movie. But one thing I do want to talk about is, like, actually Peter Parker's character, which I realize I haven't mentioned. A friend of mine once told me that she really loved Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. But one thing that he never quite got the hang of, and this is a really important thing if you're going to play Spider-Man, is the quipping. Spider-Man is a character who never shuts the fuck up. That's kind of one of his trademarks. He is always sassing his enemies. He always has a snarky comment. He is a quick-tongued, quick-witted little shit who is always making fun of his enemies as he's beating them up. And he's, like, always trying to keep it light, which is weird because Peter Parker himself has a really hard life and has to deal with a lot of shit. But when he's Spider-Man, he's always, he's got to, like, retort or something. And Tobey Maguire wasn't good at doing that. He was good at the pathos bit, but, like, when he, like, tried to wisecrack, it didn't quite work. Like, hey, Mom and Dad, hey, Junior, let Mom and Dad talk for a little bit. Like, it didn't work. Andrew Garfield was really good at the quipping. Like, he was, he was good at wisecracking, like in that clip they played in the trailer over and over, like, you found my weakness, it's small knives. Like, okay. I feel like you're not being completely genuine with me, sir. But when it came to the pathos, he struggled a little bit, except for his relationship with Gwen Stacy. That was the one moment where the emotional side of Spider-Man, like, really, really excelled, was the relationship between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. Tom Holland is actually really good at being both. Like, I've already said that he's good at being a kid. He's good at being a wisecracking shit. He's good at, like, a lot of his pathos comes from being a kid. Like, he's clearly, maybe I'm seeing this movie differently now that I'm an adult than I would have if I saw this as a kid. But I kind of felt sorry for Peter just because he was so young. Like, this movie did the clever thing that I thought they should do, which is they don't actually cover Peter's origin as part of the movie because we've seen it twice on the big screen, and probably everybody is familiar with it, even if they haven't seen those movies. Like, he gets bitten by a radioactive spider, he gains superpowers, he gains fame through some kind of star thing. It was pro wrestling in the Sam Raimi movies and a TV show in the comics. He lets the power get to his head. He lets a petty criminal get away from personal reasons. That criminal kills his Uncle Ben, and he, learns that he swears to fight for justice from now on without selfish means, and that with great power comes great responsibility and all that jazz. We know it. And the film doesn't go over it, but they do reference it. Like, they mention him being bitten by a spider. They mention that Uncle Ben is gone, and, like, he's constantly having to run around and do all this stuff, and, like, he wants to prove himself, but the adults are, like, getting harsh on him. There's one scene, like, for instance, his constant calling of Tony Stark and Happy is, like, portrayed as, like, really pathetic because they haven't called him back in weeks. And it turns out, like, he sends Happy, a guy who doesn't seem to like him as much, all these texts every day saying everything that he's done. Like, I helped an old lady with directions and she gave me churros, and, like, I got a bike that this guy stole, and, like, I quit band practice because I'm still waiting for you to call me. Please call me. And it seems like they're just ignoring him. And then it's revealed later in the movie that Happy actually has been reading all his texts and listening to his messages, and he has been relaying everything to Tony Stark. And it's like, so these adults are watching him, but they're not doing very good at being parents. And basically, he's a kid and he needs parents, and he's got Aunt May, but his Uncle Ben is dying. He doesn't have, like, he usually has a father figure in his life, and he doesn't anymore. And it's like, I don't know. One other thing about him, he's a dork. Like, Spider-Man is just portrayed as generally more hapless than the other Marvel superheroes. There's one scene I just adore where he's pursuing the truck that the Vulture and the other salvagers are in, and he's in the neighborhood of Queens, I think. So he's like, I don't know New York that well. I've only been there like twice. So he's like running, and he like shoots his web dramatically, and the web just flutters through the sky and then falls to the ground because he's in a park right now and there isn't anything high enough. So he has to like run through this golf course as fast as he can. And then the sprinklers come on, and he's like, this sucks. Like, he actually says, this sucks, as he's running through it. There was another part where it was a great scene. Like, that whole montage of him trying to catch up with the truck while not being in the, like, Manhattan, which is where all the action of the Sam Raimi movies was set, but instead having to, like, basically do parkour through the neighborhood of Queens is really funny. There's also another scene where he sees a guy trying to break into a car, and he stops the guy, and, Webb sticks the guy's hand to the car with webbing, only to find out that the guy was breaking into his own car. I guess he locked himself out or something, and all the neighbors start yelling at him because the car alarm is going off and won't stop. It's like, he's just way more inexperienced than they are. And even when we saw the other superheroes be superheroes for the first time, like, they were adults and their screw-ups were portrayed in a more serious manner. Iron Man had screw-ups when he was designing the suit, but those seem more like the trial and error of science, whereas Spider-Man just seems kind of unlucky, like constantly blundering into things or making the wrong call. It's funny at first, but there's one moment later where it gets kind of serious. But yeah, he's a likable Spider-Man. He seems like a kid. He fills the role well, and there's actually one scene that I want to talk about where he really impressed me. And this is the part where I'm going to get into spoilers, so if you're planning to see this movie and don't want to spoil anything, you basically tune out right now. So basically, I mentioned Spider-Man fucks things up. Well, at first it's kind of funny, but then you could slowly see this arc building, and it's kind of a consistent thing with Spider-Man, and one of the things that I don't really have a whole lot of patience for is that for all the good Spider-Man does, people tend to get fucking upset with him real quick. Like, they usually have, like, J. Jonah Jameson at the Daily Bugle, like, calling him a menace and publishing, like, all these vindictive newspaper articles saying, like, he's a bad and can't be trusted. But, there's also a thing where, like, Spider-Man tends to show up and he screws things up. So, basically, Tony has installed what he calls the training wheels protocol onto the suit that he designed for Spider-Man, which basically it disables a lot of the suit's functions. And there's a tracking device on it, so Tony knows where he is at all times. Peter gets his nerd friend Ned, the guy in the chair, to disable this so that he basically has access to all of the suit's functions, including an inbuilt AI which he names Karen. And basically he uses these powers to track the Vulture to one of the ferries leaving New York where they're exchanging a business deal. So he goes and intervenes. They fire at him with the super alien weapons, and this results in the ship being torn in half. And so Speeder Parker Man tries desperately to, like, knit the ship back together with the web, which was a scene from the trailers. Then Tony Stark shows up, and he is pissed because he told Peter to just stop crime in New York, stop getting involved in this Avenger shit, and, like, Peter accuses him of, like, not listening to him and, like, not listening to his cries to take the weapon dealership seriously, in which Tony reveals that he has been taking this seriously. The FBI were on the ship because Tony called them. It's like, that's a way more reasonable thing to do than to swing in a 15-year-old boy and try to stop the day or save the day yourself. And thousands of, well, not thousands, there's thousands of people couldn't fit on the ship, but, like, lots of people could have died because you were there. If you hadn't been there, they might have caught the guys right then. It was kind of rude for Tony not to call Peter and tell him that the FBI were on the ship, sit tight, but it's clear that Tony is struggling with the dad thing, and there is kind of a nice arc of, like, Tony actually, like, trying to be a dad, even though his own dad kind of bailed on him. Like, Stark Sr., Howard Stark, I think is his name, though I don't recall, wasn't really the best dad, as you probably recall from the Iron Man movies. So Tony's like, there's one part where Tony says something to Peter like, I'm trying to, my dad was never there for me, so I'm trying to break this cycle of shame. And it's like, kind of a cute line, like that he's trying to fulfill this, not exactly parental role because he's not there a lot, but like basically a guardian role. And even though Peter chased under it, he means well. It's just that Tony doesn't really know what he's doing, and his hands-off approach isn't really working in Peter's favor. Like, I know you're a busy guy, but Tony, but really just leaving him in the dark, that wasn't cool. One thing I really do like about this movie is the way it opens. It first opens with the scene of like Michael Keaton losing his salvaging job and deciding to turn to crime. But after that, it opens with this video log with Peter actually on his way to the fight scene in Captain America: Civil War, and he films it like, it's not clear if it's on a camcorder or on his phone, but it's vertical, so it's horizontal, so I guess it's a camcorder. And basically, he like films Happy driving him up to the hotel, and then like getting the new suit, and then like you see a distant shot through the camcorder of him like jumping in and helping the Avengers and stuff. And there's a scene at the end where he's like, they have to make an alibi film to show to Aunt May. So like Tony Stark gets with him. It's like, hey, Peter's been with me on the Stark internship. Hi, Aunt May. What are you wearing? Something skimpy, I hope. That's not going to work. Start it over. And they started over. It's like, it's kind of cute. And not only that, I kind of like it when films like this show supernatural things, but like through like a low quality, basically home model camera. And I really liked it when they did this in Logan too, where they have the scene where they're filming the young mutants in the facility, and like you see like fantastic things, like a kid shooting a psychic wave with his hand, or little girl, Laura, I think is her name, like slicing her arm open and watching it instantly heal over and over. Something about seeing fantastic things on like a home video camera has a really cool feel. It actually feels like you're in the world occupied by these fantastic things. And like there's one scene where like Peter's filming himself and he like in his hotel and he like flips with excitement and climbs on the walls or something, and like something about seeing that with that little camera, like it's like, wow. It's actually like, I think, more impressive than seeing it in like the HD screen, because when you see a normal action scene, like it's cool and it's impressive, and if it's done well, it can grip your seat and set your teeth, cause you to grip your seat and set your teeth on edge and really get you into it. But something about seeing it low res like makes you really believe it's happening, and I don't know, it just seems cool to me. So basically, let me mention that twist I mentioned earlier. Because it's actually pretty good, because you don't actually know that it's a twist, even though it was set up. Like with a lot of things, with Wonder Woman, I love the plot line of who is Ares, but you could tell from the beginning that there was going to be some sort of twist, like when she's constantly talking about how Ares is corrupting humanity, and that they're only bad because of Ares, and she like finds a candidate for who Ares is. Like, that's building up to a twist. Like, it has to resolve in a twist. The twist in Spider-Man Homecoming is one that you aren't expecting, because you don't think it's a twist. It just seems like a basic, like, bad guy, good guy story. So basically, after the scene with the boat, Tony gets really mad at Peter, in a scene that's pretty hard to watch, because it seems just like a fed-up parent bawling out their kid. And he basically tells Spider-Man, turn in your suit. That fancy high-tech suit I gave you with Karen inside. And Spider-Man doesn't want to, because he's like, he's a kid, and he chafes at being punished, and he knows he fucked up, but he also, he says, like, I'm nothing without the suit. And Tony's like, if you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve it. It's like, okay. So he, like, he doesn't strip right in front of him or anything, but he turns in the suit, and, he goes back home, and there's like a moment where he spends some time being an ordinary kid, like the Spider-Man No More thing, except it's way shorter this time than it was in the Sam Raimi movies. And it's like, it's kind of cool. He's hanging out with his friends again. He builds the Lego Death Star model with Ned. That's nice. And he asks Liz to the homecoming dance. She says yes. Everything's looking up and up. It's like really great, exciting. He gets to live like an ordinary kid. He goes to pick up Liz. He rings the doorbell, and Michael Keaton opens the door. Hi, you must be here for Liz. Ah! It was really well done, because you didn't see it coming. Turns out Michael Keaton is actually Liz's dad. Oops. And it was something that I wasn't expecting, because I knew Liz's last name was like, she's Liz Allen in the comics. Like, her name is Liz Allen. And so she wasn't the Vulture's daughter in the original comics. But the whole time that Liz is on screen before this reveal, they never say Liz's last name. So it's not Liz Allen, it's Liz Toombs. She's Adrian Toombs' daughter. And, like, Peter is just having to stand there while, like, Adrian, who has no idea that the kid standing in front of him is the kid that he's vowed to kill for interfering with his plans, is standing right in front of him, and he's, like, holding a steak knife. He's just like, hey, kids, Peter, you thinking about your future after high school? That's nice. And the mom's like, and like Mrs. Toombs comes in, she's like, come on, let me take a picture. And like Liz is like trying, do the date thing with him, like, oh, you look nice. And he's just standing there like screaming inside his head because the guy who's tried to kill him several times and who's been pushing these weapons is right in front of him. And why it works is because throughout the whole movie, Michael Keaton has been saying, like, I'm a father, I have a family, I'm doing this for my family. And, like, I was thinking my own, I thought to myself the irony of him trying to kill a kid when his own kid is his motivation for doing this. And it turns out my idea of, like, the kid might be Peter's age was way more on than I thought. The kid is exactly Peter's age. In fact, is in his class and is the president of the ACTEC team that he is on. It's like, ow. And they have that scene. It's like, it's always the dads. I don't know what it is about Peter Parker that makes his friends' dads want to kill him. But anyway, on the drive to the drive over to the dance, they do the thing where, like, Liz inadvertently reveals that, not knowing it herself, reveals that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, because she mentions that, oh, Peter ran off when we were in D.C., and he ran off at my party. And, like, Adrian probably knows, like, the party was the night that we were making that deal in the park. So he puts it together that Peter is Spider-Man. Well, Peter's just sitting quietly in the back of the car with his daughter. And he, like, does this really scary talk. And it's kind of scary because, again, maybe I see it differently because I'm an adult now. But talking to a teenager, he basically pulls out a handgun that I guess he keeps with him in the car and threatens Peter, telling him, you stay out of this. It's like, you can date my daughter, but if you stop me again, I am going to kill you and everyone you love. It's like, it's a grown man threatening a teenager with a gun in the back of a car. Like, I know it's, like, fantastic and campy, and, like, the movie isn't above making fun of the campy nature of it. But there was something, like, kind of gritty and scary from an adult perspective about that scene. And this leads to a really brilliant moment where, like, Peter, like, he has a choice. Great power comes great responsibility. And, like, every adult in his life has told him to stay out of it. Stay at home. Be safe. You're just a kid. And he, like, walks into the dance where all his friends are waiting for him. And Liz is, like, waiting for him. And, like, there's this music blowing around. It's really colorful and it looks inviting. And he goes up to Liz and he says, I'm sorry. You don't deserve this. And he turns away and runs. And that was one of the few moments in the film that I thought was really good. Peter choosing to be a superhero, the more dangerous path, when the villain, everybody else, gave him the option to just ignore it and not be a hero and just pretend like all this stuff isn't going on. And it was well done. Like, this movie seemed like kind of basic and paint by numbers for the most part, but that scene and the setup to it really impressed me. There was something else I wanted to talk about. I don't remember what it was. Oh, yes. Okay. So this leads to a scene that I think is one of the best acted scenes in this movie, and probably other people already know what I'm talking about. Peter goes to confront the Vulture, and the Vulture gives a speech about how, like, big superheroes like Tony Stark or Steve Rogers, like, they don't care about little guys like me, and, I have to do this to, like, make a living for my family and, like, all this stuff. And basically, what he does is he uses the Vulture wings. They're in a parking garage, and he, like, breaks down the columns supporting the upper floor so that it falls down. The entire garage basically falls down on Peter, and he leaves him there. And Peter is trapped below this rubble. He comes to, he's, like, not moving at first, but then he comes to, and he starts screaming and crying and begging for help while there's water dripping around him. And it was really painful to watch. Like, he's, like, actually crying, and he's, like, crying out for Ned, even though he doesn't have his cell phone with him, and Ned can't hear him. And he actually seems like a kid who knows that he's about to die. And it was really, really heart-wrenching. Like, oh my God. Like, Tom Holland's acting was, like, good before that, but it was, like, basic, like, good. Like, you're decent good. Like, you're good at being Spider-Man, but you haven't really brought anything, like, mind-blowing to the table acting-wise. That scene was mind-blowing acting-wise. It's like, oh my God. It was good. Yeah, the final battle was kind of cool. It was a little shorter than I'm used to, but maybe that's a good thing, since a lot of action films are so bogged down. Like, I think Transformers Dark of the Moon had a 40-minute climax. A 40-minute climax! That's too long, Michael Bay. That's too long of a climax. So the fact that it was short was like, it felt short. Maybe it was longer than it was, but it felt short. And, you know, it was kind of cool. It got some cool visuals. But, you know, that's the main scene I want to talk about. I feel like that was the crowning moment of Tom Holland's performance, is when he's trapped beneath the rubble. It's like, wow, that was good. You did really good there. So one thing I do want to talk about is how this movie ends. So basically, Peter stops the bad guy. Liz and her mother decide to move away because they don't want to be in New York because, well, I mean, their dad has been arrested for being the Vulture, and they don't want to stick around. She, like, breaks up with Peter, and it's clear that she's not happy with him, but Peter rejoins his life as a high schooler. And then Tony Stark, who was mad at him earlier in the film, congratulates him and says that he's welcome to join the Avengers, the thing that he's always wanted. He offers him, like, this really expensive-looking suit with, like, all the fancy, like, Tron lines on it, and says there's about 50 reporters waiting, and they're going to officially announce him as the newest Avenger. And Peter turns it down. Maybe it's because of what Michael Keaton said to him. Maybe it's because of his own experience just with an aunt struggling to get by and ordering sandwiches from the deli guy in the corner and rescuing his cat and being thanked by an old lady who buys him a churro. But he decides that he wants to keep being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, the thing that Tony said he should be at the beginning of the movie. And Tony accepts his decision, and Peter goes back to being New York City's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And that's how it ends. And basically, I feel like I wanted to bring up this ending because, first of all, I think it was kind of to be expected. Like, Spider-Man, because of his age and because he's grounded this one city and because of his wisecracking personality, is not like the other Avengers. He's not like a person of, like, you know, storied dignity or extreme riches or any of the other things the Avengers have, and he's kind of, like, supposed to be like an honorary Avenger who, like, solves crime in his own city. So it was kind of a thing about, like, keeping the status quo, but it was also, like, kind of a nice, like, I think it kind of builds into why people like Spider-Man, which is one of the things I said I was going to talk about. I actually, in this book, Stan Lee writes an intro to it. He calls it a foreword. It's a drawing of him in the Spider-Man costume, as if he needed more cameos. And I'm basically going to read to you what it says, because I feel like this gets into, like, a lot of the things that I've been talking about in this review. So it says, from Stan Lee, "Life is funny, as if you didn't know. I don't mean ha-ha funny. I mean in the sense of odd, peculiar, strange. You're probably wondering what this has to do with Spider-Man. Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, before coming up with the idea of everyone's favorite web swinger, I had already created the Fantastic Four and the Incredible Hulk. And after doing Spidey, Marvel and I then generously gifted an appreciative world with such characters as the X-Men, Daredevil, Iron Man, the Avengers, and, well, you get the idea. So here's the point. Why is it every new person I meet usually says something like, 'Hey, aren't you the guy who wrote Spider-Man?' I mean, they hardly ever ask me if I wrote the Hulk, or the Silver Surfer, or even Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos, for those of you with really long memories. Nope, it's always, 'Aren't you the one who wrote Spider-Man?' Now, things like that make me think. Why is Spider-Man the first character that comes to mind when people mention Marvel or me? Over the years, I've come up with a theory about that, and now, because of my justly famed generosity, I'd like to share it with you. I think Spidey has made a lasting impression because he's possibly the most realistically human of all superheroes. He never has enough money, he's constantly beset by personal problems, and the world doesn't exactly applaud his deeds. In fact, most people tend to suspect and distrust him. In short, he's a lot like you and me. There's another thing about Peter and his arachnid alter ego. When the series first started way back in 1963, Peter was just a teenager still in school. Most of the comic book readers were teenagers as well, so that made it really easy for them to identify with him. You see, at that time, all the comic book superheroes were adults. The only teenagers in comics were the hero's sidekicks. Well, I figured, where is it written that teenagers can only be sidekicks? The answer, of course, was nowhere. So Spidey was probably the first comic book hero that teenagers themselves could identify with. Well, I think I omitted another important point. You may have noticed that Peter Parker never lived in Gotham City or Metropolis, or any place that was obviously a fictional city. Nope, his very first story planted him firmly in Forest Hills, a part of New York City, so readers could really visualize him web-swinging around the streets of New York and its environs. It was just another element that gave Spidey a feeling of reality, even though he was actually part of an imaginative comic book universe. Finally, there was the humor. I tried to make sure that our web-headed wonder was never without some sort of wisecrack or sharp retort, no matter how tense the situation might be. That, too, was an effort to be realistic because, as you know, most people have a flip way of speaking. Flip. They're never portrayed as proper or pedantic, or as many other heroes are portrayed. In fact, just between you and me, Spidey talks a lot like I do. Or maybe I speak like he does. After a while, it's hard to tell who's imitating who. And there you have it. My take on the reason Spider-Man seems to have such an unshakable hold in the minds and emotions of so many readers. Even though I'm equally proud of the many other characters the mighty Marvel bullpen and I have associated with over the years, I now feel I understand why our wondrous wall crawler is the first one people think of when they talk comics to me. And I hope I've succeeded in making it clearer to you too. If I haven't succeeded, that's okay. It makes me resemble poor old Peter Parker even more. None of us ever seems to get anything totally right. There you have it. Stan Lee's own theory for why Spider-Man is one of the most popular Marvel heroes and why people are not sick of him after 2 iterations. Far from it. They were super excited for this movie. It's because Spider-Man is basically us. Whereas a character like Tony Stark fulfills a fantasy, Peter Parker is much more of who we are already. Someone who does the right thing, but who isn't always good at it. Who doesn't have the riches or the stamina or the sculpted bodies or even the history of experience that the other Marvel superheroes have. The other Avengers form very much an exclusive club that Spider-Man isn't a part of, and it kind of helps to make him more interesting. A later introduction in that same book mentions that all the other superheroes, and this is something Stan Lee mentions too, were adults when Spider-Man came out. They were billionaires, they were warriors, some of them were even royalty, like our friend the Black Panther, who'll be getting his own movie this summer. But Spider-Man isn't any of that stuff. He's just a kid who got bit by a spider one day. And I think that's become much more common in the 60s since Spider-Man came out. But Spider-Man was probably the first comic book hero who was like that. He wasn't Robin or the Dart or fucking even Captain Marvel Jr. He was the star of his own stories, even though he was young. And people like having a working class hero. Instead of having the meta-humans who stand above us, Spider-Man stands with us. And this movie does a good job portraying a high school as a school where kids actually go to, and portraying New York as a city where a bunch of different people live. There's one scene where Peter Parker actually saves a criminal that the salvagers were ganging up on, and the criminal actually thanks Peter for it later. And that seems like a very personable, human, American thing to happen. One more thing I want to mention is Spider-Man, this movie does a good job of portraying Spider-Man as living in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, all the Marvel movies are tied together, and it gives you nerd points if you can, properly put the films in chronological order and spot the connections between them. But there's something fascinating in this movie about Spider-Man being able to turn on the news and, see Iron Man, or, someone just basically... there's a group of kids sitting in the gym in one scene who are playing Fuck, Marry, Kill with the Avengers. And just the fact that the Avengers are so integrated into the world, and, the teachers are showing, instructional videos starring Captain America in class, which is really funny, by the way. And, like they basically live in a world occupied by weird shit now. And I feel like the Marvel Cinematic Universe appeals to so many people, kind of the same way that Nostalgia Critic pointed out that the film Roger Rabbit appeals to so many people. Because Roger Rabbit portrays like all your favorite cartoon characters as existing in the real world side by side with humans, and you could like pass them on the street, and like you could go to a bar and like see Donald Duck performing live, and that's the kind of world that people have always wanted to live in. So the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that same world, but for comic book characters instead of cartoon characters. It's a world where, like, fantastic things could happen every day, and all your favorite superheroes are walking around, and they're on the news, and they're in their houses, and they're like, this is the first film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't think I've ever said anything bad about it, really. I haven't really criticized it at all, but I have said that it's just decent. It didn't blow me away, but this is the first Marvel film that I feel like portrayed that world of fantastic things and made you feel like you were there. And maybe Peter Parker himself helps, a hero from more humble origins than Tony Stark, who built this in a cave with a box of scraps. But there are no caves in Spider-Man's origin story. But, there's something about this movie that's relatable in a way, whether it's the hero that we already are or the hero that we want to be, very much more than the hero that we are in our wildest power fantasies, like the other Avenger films. So I think Spider-Man is more personable and more, relatable, to use a cliche word, but I feel like that's why people are excited for this movie, and that's why people love the Spider-Man franchise. So, yeah, I kind of got into navel-gazing there, but I think this is a decent movie, and it's worth checking out. Just, if you're looking for basic superhero fare, but starring your favorite superhero, and Spider-Man is a lot of people's favorite superhero, then this movie delivers exactly that. And it has some good moments and good scenes, too. So, yeah, I'd say it's worth checking out. So that's it. Spider-Man might be a more quintessentially American hero than even Captain America, at least the way I see it. Because, like, Captain America was originally intended as, like, a propaganda piece when he first came out. Like, the World War II, like, for our troops, And they even, like, use him as, like, a role model in those same videos I mentioned in the film. But, like, Spider-Man represents, like, someone who came from lowest origins. Not the lowest, but built himself up, who knows a bunch of people. And in the movie, who lives in a diverse world. And, lives in New York City, one of our biggest cities. So yeah, I feel like it's a very like impressionable, like it feels like home. He feels like a homespun hero, and I guess that's part of the reason why the film is called Spider-Man: Homecoming. So kind of got more analytical than I meant to, but yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. So hope you enjoyed the movie. I might be back for a Black Panther review. Maybe not. But either way, it's Dragon Keeper 96600 signing off. Shazam!